1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, I'll sit next to you.
First come, first serve. So we are starting in 2 minutes.
The best left back in the world at the moment, yeah.
Jan Mulvey, surely.
No. But Jan Mulvey is ancient.
Can you please sit down? We are about to start. Okay, so first of all, I would like to thank everybody who participated in the roundtables. This was a very tough exercise. We were actually afraid in the beginning if this turns out well or not. But let me tell you, we produced some 25 pages of community feedback. Yeah, so applause for that. So, and I will ask the facilitators now to each give a brief summary on what their tables produced. And so we will have a 3-minute summary from each group now, starting with Roberto.
Can we go to my page?
And this is mine.
Yeah, so you can go to mine here, thanks.
I don't know.
No. I'll put my own now.
Yeah, I think this is better.
So, find your phone there. Yeah. Okay, so we were in the left at the back there of the room, and we said we'd name our teams, and our team was left back. So who's the most famous? Who's the best left back in the world at the moment? Andy Robertson. At the moment, yeah. Paolo Maldini, yes, of course. Anyway, so we had a good mix of people in the team. So we had a good mix of views as well. So we had a mix of service providers, research support staff, librarians and funders as well. So I think really the view that we got from wasn't skewed towards one type of stakeholder. We had multiple types of stakeholders involved there. And looking at the three questions there, the first one about what's in it for the users, what would delight them. The first remark, which I think is worth noting, is that it was very much appreciated to have this user-centric view, okay? Because start from the user, what they want, what's the benefit for them, that's appreciated. And what came out of this discussion was, well, for the users, a node would provide a point of contact for users in a specific domain, so that's a go-to point to know about what's available, what they need to do, how they interact with EOSC, etc. Get all this information, which at the moment is they don't know where to find it, right? So having that point of contact is beneficial. Then it's seen that the node has the potential and should really focus on making the life of the users easier, their workflows easier, and they don't really care about what's underneath or what's behind that, but they do care that the node contributes to making their workflows easier, so they can do their work much more easier, again, as I'm saying. A node can also enable more localized and tailored services according to the specific needs of the region, the thematic discipline, where they are, and all these things. At the same time, this increased functionality or increased localization and tailorization of the service that the node can offer to the target users, there's concern that it can lead to silos, because then they become so tailored that other users and other disciplines can't make use of it, right? But this can be addressed through federation, defining what is federated and what common features become federated. That's on the first bit there, and then, sorry, if I go down here. For the second question, are EOSC core and exchange services common to the whole platform, or does the implementation vary? There is a minimum set of common functionality so that the interfederation can work, right? But other than that, the nodes can be done very differently from one another, so long as that baseline there is common. It's noted also that in many cases you will have services in a node that are not available outside the country, outside of the domain, but they will still be part of a node. So again, here you really have to look at what is being federated within the node to address that point there. And also have a federation of catalogs as well. Really it's also about federation of catalogs here. And then the last point was who decides if a node can be admitted and on what basis. So in terms of on what basis, it was felt that the current rules of participation are too high level and we need more detailed technical inclusion criteria. And the EduAgain example was cited as a good example to follow there in terms of on what basis you are federated. And who decides? Well, a very strong point was made here that it should definitely not be based on who pays, right? But again, the EduAgain model came in here again. Federations are self-inclusive. There needs to be somebody who decides, and not quite clear who that is, but it ought to come from the federation, and again, definitely not be based on who pays. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Annabelle?
Okay, I'm not going to repeat what Roberto said. We had a really, really interesting group, a lot of service providers, a couple of funders in there as well, and some users too. We had quite a challenging conversation because actually there wasn't, I'm going to be completely honest, in my group there was not a great understanding of what an EOSC node is. So we spent the first couple of minutes quite challenging, because if you're looking at what the added value is, you have to understand what an EOS node is. But in line with perhaps some of the other things that people have said, my group was very keen, and they reckoned a contact point or a competence center. They felt that would be something useful for the EOS node. Another interesting thing that someone raised is these nodes shouldn't be too big, especially when you're looking at thematic nodes. So the idea that you would have this enormous thematic node in a particular area was a bit of a concern about things falling through the gaps. And everybody agreed that it should be something that improves research processes and add value, and I think we can all agree with that. On the second point, again, we were quite challenged as folks didn't really understand, well, what's the EOS core? What's an EOSC exchange service? And so instead, we talked about, well, what's the user going to expect? And I think I'm going to quote, let's be more edurome. So from the user perspective, seamless access to everything that's out there. They don't really care what's underneath. And users having a full choice of service, and those services adding value. And then finally, on the who decides if a node can be admitted question, there was a definite agreement that it will very much depend on the size of the node, the type of the node, but that you should really consider using examples from existing well-established federations. And it was noted there, we have very well-established edurome and edge-game federations. So, you know, let's not reinvent the wheel, and let's look at things that work already. And that's pretty much it. And I just really want to thank my group for their contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andrea?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, also our discussion was quite intensive and challenging, and mainly because this difficulty to clearly define what the node is and what is the discussion about the node, because we have the impression we have this movement between descriptive discussion and normative discussion. What should the node be and what is the node? So, and at the end we were discussing above all about what the node should be. Yeah? And I think this is important because at the moment we have the impression we miss to make more explicit which are the needs behind the node, why we introduce exactly this concept and not another. Yeah? Yes, at the end it's a metaphor, the node, why we use this specific word. Yeah? It would be help to clarify better the scope of the discussion. In any case, we had a lot of discussion about the added values. So, and there was also a question about the added values for who are the end user, yeah? And someone was saying the end user are the researcher at the end. And in this case, the node would provide information, support for research activity, but other people in the group, so service provider was highlighting that the node would be mainly intended for service provider to facilitate their activities, above all to standardize data practices. This was a concept, data practice standardization also among countries. So this was an highlight in the discussion. And we were saying also to save cost. If we can decentralize, if we can outsource to the node some kind of activities, we could be able as service provider to save resources. So this was on the point one. And also the question about the responsibility. So we could better understand which are the added value if we would be able to clarify the responsibility of the node. At the moment it was not clear. For question 2 about this exchange, this was also a difficult question. Too many questions are open in order to answer this question. Otherwise, for question 3, admission exclusion, there was a clear accent on the topic of sustainability. So sustainability should be a criterion for defining which are the node that should be supported or not. And someone was saying maybe are the nodes something like organic, as though like organism, and we would have something like a natural selection of the node. The node will be generated through some kind of interest, but then only the fit will survive. So we would say, okay, it's a bit strong, but it could be something there because node operate in a free market. We should consider it too. And yeah, and there was also some discussion about the need to balance a bottom-up and top-down approach in organizing, in deciding about the node, the admission, the exclusion of the node. So I think this was.
Thank you very much to the group and to Andrea. Anders, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the group for a great discussion. I think in the group I was facilitating, there was a shared understanding that the node would be the entry point to EOSC, and in fact the point from which you unfold what you have to offer, but also from where you get access to all the rest. So actually somebody said the node is the first door to open, and the things should be easy to find and use, discover, and access of other people's stuff. And from that point of view, there was different perspectives. There were people from NRENs and national infrastructure providers. There were from research performing organization and from thematic research infrastructure. So we got a number of aspects, starting in a way with the business point of view and overall point of view that a node serves a goal for its users and delivers data products that serves that goal. So remember that, and from that unfolded into different dimensions. One was kind of the open science dimension. We want to share our data, what we provide, and make that accessible to others, and we want to help our users get access, so more data exchange and more collaboration between researchers. That was one dimension. The other one was from the service provider side. We want to increase the visibility of our services. We want maybe to get more users, both for get more revenue, but also to be able to increase the quality of our services and develop our services further. And finally, there was some discussions about legal stuff that researchers must adhere to and other complications, and an idea that a node should make researchers' life easier. And one thing could be to somehow make sure that the kind of level legal problems, and also make sure that if you access stuff or services or data through your node, they are fit for purpose. That was, I think, the main lines on the value proposition. We skipped the core and exchange part as we were short of time, and discussed a little bit about the governance side, where I think there was an overall idea that a node defines its own governance, but there could be templates or kind of best practice that EOSC would provide to use to establish that, and also that there would probably be an overall governance, maybe the association or similar, that would be then a community that would facilitate a kind of community according to common standards, and that would have the authority to include or exclude nodes, but based on best efforts to help nodes in trouble before they were possibly excluded. Yeah, I think, and also this EOSC template should again secure that policies, standards, GDPR, legal stuff is done correctly by the nodes in order to also function as a federation.
Thank you very much. To Anders and the group. Dale, please.
Okay, thank you. So, firstly, thank you to my group for really engaging with this and contributing well. On the first point, a brief summary. Overall, we observed that nodes should add value for end users, which is maybe a bit of a tautology, but it doesn't mean it doesn't need to be said. They should add to the ease of use of resources for end users, contributing to the strength of research communities, was the feeling. Need to be user-friendly, so in other words, ensuring information is easy to navigate. And the node itself should be as transparent as possible, and should not erect a further barrier for researchers to have to negotiate, making their lives actually more difficult rather than less difficult. There was also, slightly more concretely, there was a suggestion that a node should provide a CRIS-type system at the national level, so thinking of a national node, for digital services as well. And another contribution that they should provide training resources. They're very valuable, and that was seen as a very important value that nodes can add for end users. On the next point, an overall summary. The sense was that EOS core is more common, whereas the exchange concept could be more of a distributed sort of thing. There's room for more variety, perhaps, across exchanges. So you could have national or thematic versions of exchanges, for example. But you need to be careful that potentially the value for the user is reduced if you do that, and confusion is increased if you have more than one exchange. So you do need to be careful. Take care about what's made available through an exchange. There was an observation that open science shouldn't involve boundaries, so I think that needs to be borne in mind. There was a suggestion that the node should provide a dashboard concept. So if you do, for example, have more than one exchange, you could have a dashboard where the different exchanges were presented for an end user, so they still actually had one place where they could access all of the information. But it's important to have interoperability. There was also an observation that you need to respect funding and regulatory barriers and restrictions if you've got different exchanges. On the final point, here I would say I think we struggled with this. The observation was, well, first you need to define what a node is. But then the comments we put together were that you need to define a basic set of requirements which a node should fulfill. For example, is the node a legal entity? So we weren't saying yes, it should be, or no, it shouldn't be. We were just, this was one particular example we could identify of the sort of requirements that you might need to tick a node off against. Another important criteria was simply, does an entity provide useful value to end users, and is that enough to make it a node? Possibly yes. So that should perhaps make it admissible to be a node. But there was also an observation that the requirements placed on national nodes should be different from the requirements stipulated for thematic nodes. We of course observed that how do you build the list of requirements and who should build them, or indeed check them or check compliance against them? We don't have answers to that, I don't think. But yeah, that was it overall. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To Dale and the group. Gareth, please.
Thank you. So I guess if Roberto was left back, we were corner forward. So our group was over here. I'm not sure consensus would be the full word for this, but in any case, I will present this as it came. So first question, added value of an EOSC node. First, of course, came up was the definition of a node. So it is difficult, as we do not know what a node is, to repeat that. We need to see if this is indeed needed or useful, that we're not yet sure if there's a full benefit for this term, and researchers already have many entry points, so is adding another one complicating this issue. On the issue of boundaries, that it was difficult to define node boundaries, There are, of course, national, regional, thematic, and or language barriers that researchers are not necessarily attached to specific nodes, and a question on how to provide access to them, for instance, via NRENs or existing infrastructures. In terms of data metadata, it was raised that the focus should be on data, not services, that indeed there should be a minimum set of standards for the data, tagging of the data is critical, and that a node could potentially enable metadata translation. Then to the added value, that the node could help navigate the complexity and help the end user, the researcher, understand the ecosystem. It could provide access to cross-domain data, give access to high-quality trusted data, potentially help researchers find data, so kind of yellow pages, and help researchers also share their data. Noting that there's different types of end users with different goals, and that in any case, the end users should be included in all of this discussion and consulted and taken into the equation. On the second question on the commonality of EOS Core and EOSC Exchange services, regarding EOS Core, and these opinions vary, that by definition core services should be the same, that they should not depend on exchange services. There should be diversity allowed across the nodes. Subsidiarity is key here for any given node, and that if there is no agreement on core services, then such a service should potentially not be part of the core. For the exchange, that there should be a variety allowed for different services. Generic services could be offered potentially on all. Thematic services may not be relevant for all different nodes, and some services thus would not necessarily need to be in all nodes. In any case, researchers could be provided access to different nodes to gain access to different sets of services, different sets of data. On the final question on admissibility or exclusion of a node to the Federation and on what basis, again, data came back, so the focus is on data, not services. The data should be trusted, not necessarily the nodes. The data could be or should be curated to be included. And again, users should have a strong say here in the standards that are set for the data. Then an issue of a label came up, so that the EOSC node is essentially a type of trusted label or a stamp. Awards thus should be attached to this, so clear criteria should be attached to a label. If the criteria are not fulfilled, then it's not trusted, and that you're essentially here talking about rules of participation for a node. Then finally, on the criteria, that the EOS community itself should decide criteria. No one body was proposed to act as a watchdog here. Again, the reliability of data is critical. Reliability of services is also critical. However, there should be standards for both. In any case, the users here could support the reliability somewhat similar to the internet model. Nodes are most likely managing services, not necessarily data. The data is probably managed in turn by RPOs and our infrastructures, and so a separation of data and services may be needed.
Thank you very much to Gareth and the group. Ilaria?
Thanks to my group that was sitting in the back rows. Okay, so the first feedback to the first point was that it depends on the type of node, either thematic or regional or national, but that the trend would be to like securing services and access from everywhere to everybody in a seamless way, and to also kind of provide use cases to set the example on how things work in the practice. So very much like let's say the several use cases that we have seen, for example, working in EOSC Future. So overall, the added value provided by the node, irrespective of their type, would be to federate and coordinate the effort to provide users with access to services and data, irrespective on where both users and content come from, led by open science principles and in a seamless way as much as possible. On the following points, of course, defining minimum requirements is difficult, but the idea would be to have a set of minimum interoperable services that could change, of course, according to the perspective. If, for example, the node is thematic, and that there would be needed very much a level of communication across the services to allow for interoperability and commonalities. And of course, as it's already been mentioned, there is not a recipe that suits all, but rather there should be kind of models or blueprints for different type of nodes with minimum set of services that the node should deliver or like make available based on its nature. And also that funding streams to support the node should be taken into account as when it comes to define which services are available through the node, especially when it comes to their maintenance in the long term. On the third point, who decides if a node can be admitted or excluded? This can't be just top-down, so for example, decided at the EC level, but it has to be part of a negotiation led by the principle that all the members of the federation should agree on a set of principles, and most of all ensure that there is a proper and continuous assessment on the level of the services and data that are provided by the node. And also the other point was that the federation should create synergies to avoid the application of effort. For example, creating thematic nodes that are too similar and therefore they are providing more or less the same kind of services or content. And yeah, that was it.
Thank you very much, Ilaria and the group. Then I would like to ask Diego to the stage.
Okay. Also, in my case, I'd like to thank all the members of my group for the very interesting discussion. I would say that what we have developed in my group is quite aligned with what we already have also from other groups. Related to the first question about the added value of the EOSC Node, what that is clearly emerged by the discussion is that the end users are not interested on EOSC Node, EOSC Federation, and so on. All this stuff should be completely transparent to them. The node should make their life easier. It should allow them to improve the way they can achieve their main objectives. Via an EOSC Node, the idea is that the user can easily access multiple assets, services, data, research objects, and so on, from multiple sources. So this is what the user should get without knowing anything about how this is implemented. So the federation should be completely transparent. Related to the second question, I think in this case the discussion was simpler, since we think it doesn't make any sense to give mandate to use a specific technology for the use of services in each node. The important point is the ability of these different nodes to work together, to interoperate, and for this we don't need to mandate specific technologies, but we need to define interfaces, protocols that would allow the different federation components of each node to work together. For the exchange, the idea is that each node will offer to its user a subset of the exchange services that are, useful for the users behind the same node. So, EOSC node does need to deliver the overall exchange services, but can identify the subset of resources, then can really be useful to their users. So if we have a thematic node, the resources will be fine-tuned to the need of these specific thematic communities. We didn't have the time to go into the details on the third questions. What was clear from the very quick discussion we had on this point, that we need to define clear rules of participation that would allow to understand what are the requirements for a node to join the network of nodes. That's in a nutshell the result of my group.
Thank you very much. Then I was also facilitating a group, and I give a quick summary of this before then handing over back to Bob on the open questions and the next steps. So within my group, the added values that have been mentioned were the simplicity and transparency towards the end users. What was mentioned as well was the proximity and the visibility in terms of the location, but also in terms of the domain of a given topic, basically. And then what else has been mentioned was that having a contact point and a node being a coordinator, some kind of an establishment of order is an added value, and that there is a guarantee on sustainability and what the kind of services may be provided. On the second question, the response was that there should be a common core. What was an open question is there still whether there should be a common EOSC-X change or not. There were some points against it and some points for it. And what was clear is the no-brainer that services should be interoperable. On the last question, it was clear that the decision basis should be a lightweight rules of participation or some kind of guidelines. And on the question on who decides upon this, it was clear it should be a community decision. And currently, this means it would be the setting of EOSC Association, steering board, and tripartite. And with this, I thank also for the participation in my group. And then I hand over back to Bob. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, so before we go into sort of the open questions and the next steps, now that you've heard the summaries from the different facilitators, does it raise any questions or comments that people would like to bring up now? Mark? Do you want to, can we give him a mic?
Do you have any mics? I don't know. This last question is interesting.
Is that working?
No.
Okay, can we give a microphone that works?
Not necessarily. Hello. Okay. This last question is interesting because the question is, what's the decision process for a node being in or out of the federation? And then within the node has some stuff. So there's a question of whether the node has sort of a delegated responsibility to make its own decisions about what stuff is in the node. And then the node is admitted to the federation or not. And we don't have the current situation where we have a bunch of people looking at individual services and saying, are you in or out? What's the inclusion criteria? So I'm wondering if if this has come up amongst any of the groups as to whether there's sort of delegated responsibility to the nodes about what services should be in the node, and then there's a separate conversation about whether the federation will accept that node with all of its own decisions about stuff. So.
Yeah. Anybody want to, did it come off for anybody? Kind of.
I have a comment on it. Does this work? Yes. It was not explicitly discussed, but I think it was inherent in the notion that the node would have its own governance and would also reply to the rules of participation. So the federation, sorry. So that the governance of the node itself would have to secure the housekeeping, so to speak, of its own content, and that would then have to apply to the wider federation's requirement.
Some other information for that as well. As I said, this is like the third event in a series. We had one with the mandated organizations, one with the research infrastructures. At those two events as well, we also had some written input from the Rules of Participation Task Force, and they picked up explicitly on this point. basically saying that there should be some rules of participation for nodes within the federation, but then the responsibility within an individual node for the specific services that are included, and also their adherence to the policies and rules, is the responsibility of whoever is responsible for that node. Okay, so there is this sort of layered model, and that is some of the work that the rules of participation has been done. In the slides I quickly went through at the beginning as well, that was included in the summary that was on the ones from those two events as well. Okay. Gareth.
So I don't know if there needs to be a distinction then again here between core services and exchange services. But if you take the idea that core services should be common to all nodes, then by implication there should be governance of the core set. And thus that would probably be part of the rules of participation for a node. If you allow flexibility in exchange services, then I guess again the implication there is whether there's some set of criteria they can decide on the services that come in. Maybe again following some basic set of principles or criteria for exchange services.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Giorgio.
Yes, a comment. I think we are sort of changing paradigm. We started with the idea that EOSC is the federation of the most advanced data infrastructures or data services existing in Europe, to make a system that will percolate back to all the research community. We are shifting to a construction of things that do not exist, but that have to be made. So the node, to me, is an abstract idea. It's not something, maybe some advanced thematic or whatever configuration may believe they could become a node, but for others, I think it's just an added layer of superstructure that is not going to facilitate. Now, let me make a joke. We know that it's a complex idea to move from the European Union to a federation, but still, if we think of that, we think of states, not of geographic nodes, language nodes, or things that don't exist that will make the process for another 2 centuries undoable. So I would be very careful to taking this. It's a paradigm shift that you are proposing, and I'm not sure that we all understand the added value of that.
Okay. So on that point in specific, it was touched on as well in the session that we organized with the research infrastructures. And it was highlighted that they are existing federations that with many of them actually do refer to nodes. EOSC-A, for example, it has in its terminology the fact that it has a hub and many nodes, and it's very well documented. In particular, I highlight this one because many other research infrastructures also have such models, but it's not so easy to access the documentation on it. So they do exist. We recognize that each one is quite different, and one of the important things that came across was it should not be inventing another layer, right? So these structures are already there, they already exist. They could become nodes in the EOSC Federation, just as they are nodes within their thematic structures as well. So I think everybody agrees, and that was on the summary slide as well from the research infrastructures, that we have to keep the barriers for entry low, and we shouldn't be creating additional bureaucracy and additional elements in establishing the EOSC Federation. Yeah. Someone else like to? At the back, I can see a hand, but I can't see who it is. Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Bob, for clarifying this, because in the discussion it sounded now a bit as if the idea is to create a lot of new things. So I think federation for me means we rather identify which ones are the nodes. You just mentioned EOSC-A. For me, this is a perfect example. And then we federate this, and with this idea, which was mentioned before, one gives more responsibility to these nodes and says, okay, you know how to do these things, so you please do this, and then you hook it up to our EOS ecosystem. So I think the message shouldn't be that we want to create a lot of things. As you said, there's the possibility, of course, that there are new structures being formed. But this shouldn't be the first idea here. We don't want to make the life more complex here.
No, no, it's complicated, it is. And then there was a question at the back. With the light here, I can't see who it is. Mark, okay, thank you.
Hi, Mark van der Zande from SURF. What I'm a little bit missing currently in the discussion, because we are only discussing about what is a node. For me, it is more important, what do you want to federate? For which capabilities, which functions do you want to federate within EOSC? Because if you define what you want to federate, which capabilities you want to federate, it will all define what a node should be able to do, what should be able to be provided. And I think that should be more the discussion. What do you want to federate?
Yeah, and I think that comes back a bit to Giorgio's comment as well, that we have to start with the existing things that are there. As we said, it's not a green field, right? It's a federation of existing services and data sets that are already out there and operating and very well serving their users. So we're trying to bring those together. And I think, as we said, we start with those ones where we have concrete examples and pull those together, right?
Yeah, another remark after everything I heard that came out of the teams. We are not only talking about a node being there to onboard, but also as a window on what is circulating within EOSC, because that is the impression I got. Do we also want, if there is a node, to be a window on what's in EOSC, not only for onboarding services in EOSC? That is a question. I don't know if we can answer it now, but I had the impression that it was both in the discussions.
Yeah. Anyone want to add? Was that picked up on some of the comments? Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely say in the group I was facilitating that there was this notion of things going in and out. It was a focus point for exchange of, for some people, data, for other people, mainly services. It was both ways. It was to be able to access other people's data, or for a service provider to be able to use other people's provision to provide to your own community.
But through the node, not on a more general level. So
through
like really
the node.
a window.
Through the node, is, if I understood it
might not
correctly.
be everything that's in EOSC.
Yeah, and if I may add a comment to George's, and about building a new thick layer, or just it was a kind of wish list, so to speak. What could we imagine a node could provide? So obviously it doesn't come out of nothing. But one way of doing it could say there would be a baseline that a node would need to have, and then from there on it would be possible to add additional functionality.
Yep. Yeah, okay, that came from there as well. All right, I don't see any other hands at the moment. We're coming towards 6 o'clock, and I recognize that, we're getting tired. So what we should try and do, I'll tell you what's going to happen in terms of the next steps, okay? So as I said, this is essentially the third in a series of events. And collectively, between this event and the first two, we've gathered input from, I would estimate, approximately 150 people. So I think from the association's point of view, we've done quite well in consulting with the community and understanding what their feelings are and thoughts are on this point. What we will try and do now, with the help of the EOSC Focus project, is try and document what we've understood and some key points about the concept of the nodes and the relevance for EOSC. That information will be shared with you. We will also share with you the written input that we've received, plus the summaries that you have from today, and so on, from the tables there as well. We'll share all this information so it's made available. As I said, in terms of written input, we had written input from some of the task forces. We also received written input from a position paper from Gian as well, all contributed. We'll make these all these available. And the next steps that we will use, we will share this summary that we have as well with the European Commission. They can take it on board in the preparations they have for how they are building their EC node. But there is a secondary element which is important to us as well, which is the whole concept around the federation. What are the rules of federation? In many cases today, we've talked about the rules of participation. Most people have said that they've been too high and they're at a very general level. What we have to do is get from that to some practical, usable set of rules of participation, which can actually enable our federation to come into existence. And we have timelines for that. If the EC is putting in one node in early 2024, as we heard this week, we have to make sure that when we have the other nodes coming in and working with that, we have to have some basis of rules of participation in place for that as well. Yes, they will evolve. Yes, they will have to be agreed with the community here as well, but at least we'll have a first version that we can start using and making something practical, okay? So with that, Sebastian, is there something else you would like to add? Thank you very much. All right. Thank you very much for your active participation in this event. And that's the end of the session. Thank you for that, guys.